Kentucky has gotten themselves into quite the front court predicament. Who's going to patrol the paint for John Calipari next season? Oscar Tshiebwe or Hunter Dickinson? Or neither?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host today, Isaac Shade, and I want to thank you for joining us on the show. Coming up today, it's just basically a big old fat SEC party going down. We're going to talk about Tennessee getting Santiago Vescovi back. We're going to look at LSU kind of retooling with a bunch of homegrown talent. But before we get there, we need to talk about the Kentucky Wildcats because they are in a very interesting scenario right now where they're trying to figure out, is Oscar Tshiebwe coming back, or can we get Hunter Dickinson, or are we going to miss out on both of them? We're so used to the coaching carousel in college basketball where it's like a coach takes a job at a new school and then it's a whole domino effect where another job opens and they got to fill that. And we're often waiting on like, well, we can't move for this school until this school moves, but then we can get you over there, all that kind of thing. Well, now in the transfer portal era of college basketball, the same thing is happening with players. And right now, this is the preeminent example of that in college basketball. And so right now, the question is, who is going to be Kentucky's main big man next year? The five, the main center. Will it be Oscar Tshiebwe? Will it be Hunter Dickinson? Or is there a possibility that either the Wildcats choose to, or perhaps miss out on both, and then wind up with a different option? Got to tell you, it's quite the pickle. Sandlot would be proud. What's the guy's name? Smalls, right? Benny the Jet Rodriguez, that's who I'm looking for, would be proud of this pickle. So if you're John Calipari, if you're this staff, what should you do? How should you approach that? Here's the basic problem. Oscar Tshiebwe right now is in the draft, but has maintained his collegiate eligibility. He's wanting to play it out for quite a while, let the process play out. But Hunter Dickinson wants to make, at least from what we're told, a decision more quickly than Oscar Tshiebwe might be ready to make a decision. And so if you're Kentucky, how do you handle that? What do you do? Well, for me, it's kind of similar to fantasy football. If any of you have played that, or any fantasy game, I just use football because it's the biggest entity in the fantasy world. It's all about minimizing risk. You want to get players with the highest floor and highest ceiling, truthfully, but you want high floor. You don't want something that is a risky proposition, like a high risk, high reward. You want to do something that's going to put you in the best position to win week after week after week after week. And it's the same kind of thing for Kentucky. Do you pin all your hopes on Tshiebwe coming back, which means you might not move quickly enough to get Hunter Dickinson, but then Tshiebwe decides not to come back and you've lost both? Is that what you want to do? I don't know. Well, let's set up what we know right now for both players. As for Hunter Dickinson, we learned kind of on Thursday that he is indeed going to take a visit to Lexington early next week. Monday, he will be there from a podcast that he does as part of Barstool. He was talking about how Coach Cal flew up to meet with him for 2 hours at just this little private airport. And they talked about all sorts of stuff. Coming out of that, he is going to take a visit to Lexington. Now, the reason he originally wasn't planning to is because he's been before, so doesn't necessarily need to. But they talked and he's going to go. From everything I had been hearing up until this, it sounded like he was hoping to make a decision this week, Hunter Dickinson. But with doing that on Monday, by the way, he's at Kansas right now, late in this week. He started on Thursday, and then he'll be there. The other thing, though, is that unless he hears something at Kansas or Kentucky that just really makes him go ahead and commit on the spot, he talked about at the end of that podcast that he's taking a visit to Villanova next Friday, like the 28th of April. And so any discussion about him wanting to make a decision this week clearly doesn't have to be a thing because he's going to Villanova again, assuming that that he doesn't make a quicker decision. So that's the Hunter Dickinson side of things. As for Tshiebwe, you don't know if he's coming back or not. We do know that he would prefer to turn pro if the right situation presents itself. He's playing that out. And interestingly, Tshiebwe, from what we're told, has given his blessing to the coaching staff at Kentucky. Like, listen, I know you can't wait on me. Go find your replacement if you need to. And that just speaks to the person that Oscar Tshiebwe is. He's like, I've got to do this for me, but I understand that you as a program might need to move on. And so a big part of this becomes, who would you rather have between this two? Well, if it's a question of minimizing risk, I think you'd rather not wait on Tshiebwe. If I'm the Kentucky coaching staff, in terms of how this context is playing out, I think you got to pursue Dickinson and go get him. Clearly, that's what John Calipari is trying to do. I mean, he's flying to meet with him in Michigan. Because if all signs are pointing to Oscar would prefer to leave and Oscar's process is going to take longer, you don't want to risk letting Hunter Dickinson walk and then missing out on Tshiebwe as well. So contextually, I think you got to go get Dickinson. In terms of all things being equal, who would you prefer? I would take Oscar Tshiebwe for a couple reasons. Number one, look at what he's done for this program the last 2 years. He's been obviously was the National Player of the Year 2 seasons ago. Wasn't quite himself this year, right? Didn't get back to back. But let's not pretend like he didn't have great numbers. He did. And quite frankly, if Oscar Tshiebwe was coming back next season, I think he would get back to what he did 2 years ago. He had that knee issue and that kind of microsurgery ahead of this most recent season. And it took him a while to get back to what he does. But once he was going, boy, he was going. Now, I know there's things that he has that are shortcomings where in terms of his game that Dickinson has that he can do better. Like Dickinson can step out and shoot a three. That's not Oscar's game. Dickinson can provide more rim protection. That's not really Oscar Tshiebwe's game. Stuff like that. But Oscar is a phenomenal rebounder, and Dickinson just isn't that, despite Tshiebwe being a little more undersized than Dickinson is. In terms of the people, who they are, man, I would rather have Oscar Tshiebwe on my team, the person, than Hunter Dickinson, the person, regardless of basketball skill. Just from everything I know about these two young men, and that's not to speak ill of Hunter Dickinson, that's just to speak positively of Oscar Tshiebwe and who he is. I would rather have him. Now, here's the thing. What happens if you say, I don't know about Hunter Dickinson, maybe he's just trying to play us to get more NIL money. That's one of the rumors going around. I don't want to dive into the depths on that. But what happens if you let Dickinson walk, you pursue Tshiebwe, and he doesn't come back? So what if the option is neither? Well, here's where you're in good shape if you're Kentucky, depending upon how you feel about what you already have. Because remember, Ugonna Onyenso entered the transfer portal and has decided to come back. That alone tells me some other things about Oscar's plans, right? Onyenso is more of a defensive presence than Tshiebwe is. He's more of a rim protector, a big, can finish the lobs, play above the rim a little bit. And so depending on how much the staff believes in him and his ability, maybe you don't feel as tied to either of the bigger name prospects, both Tshiebwe and Dickinson. And then there's the other thing. Not only is there the Onyenso factor, there's also the Aaron Bradshaw factor. Kentucky has a loaded recruiting class coming in, including Aaron Bradshaw, who is a 7-footer and a versatile 7-footer at that. He's another guy that can step out and shoot it. Now, I've heard Coach Cal talk about that he might want to use him at the 3 because of his versatility, but he's a 7-footer. You're going to play him at the 5 and let him be part of the front court. So depending on how you feel about Bradshaw's capability and how you feel about Onyenso's capability, if you could have kind of that two-headed front court, maybe you don't need either Dickinson or Tshiebwe. I mean, obviously you would take them, but do you believe enough in what you have already in Lexington? If so, Oscar, blessings to you in the pros. If so, Hunter Dickinson, have fun at Maryland or Kansas or wherever, Villanova, wherever you end up. We'll be okay. And Kentucky's proven before that they can win big with a freshman big. You ever heard of a guy named Anthony Davis? Now, I know he's a generationally different talent that you just don't see every day, but it's not a thing. You know what I mean? So just keep all that in mind. So another thing, if Kentucky does get Hunter Dickinson and then Oscar Tshiebwe decides to come back, we haven't really talked about that. Where would Tshiebwe go? That would be an interesting thing. Remember, he started at West Virginia, then came to Kentucky. So that would be something else to keep your eye on. But here's the thing for me. Whoever is Kentucky's starting front court next year, keep in mind, they are going to be okay. They've got an absolutely stupid level freshman class incoming. Antonio Reeves seems like a legit option to return, primarily based on what he could get through NIL, as opposed to, it sounds like he doesn't want to just kind of drudge his way through the G League and not make much or be in the highlights. Another thing is that Chris Livingston could come back. And so Kentucky, regardless of what happens with this, is going to be fine. So if you're asking me, who would I rather have in a vacuum? Oscar Tshiebwe. If you're asking me who they should take contextually because of the timelines, I think it's Dickinson. But maybe they feel okay with neither of them, and that's a real possibility as well. Coming up in a second, Tennessee got great news this week when Santiago Vescovi announced that he was returning to Knoxville. We're going to be joined by the host of Locked On Vols, Mr. Eric Kaner. We'll do that in just a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built. Something very exciting is coming to Built.com on April 22nd. That's tomorrow, Saturday. I'll have all the details for you, but the excitement is real, and it's something, friends, that you do not want to miss. If you know how Built works, they have the most incredible protein bars out there. And they do these like amazing flavor drops with a limited release. Ooh, limited release, limited quantity, I love that. So mark your calendars, head over to Built.com tomorrow, Saturday, April 22nd, to be one of the first to discover what all the hype is about. I can't wait to see what this new flavor is. My guess is prune rhubarb. No, I'm just kidding. I would love it to be something out there like a peach cobbler. I'm a Southern boy, and that would speak to me. Regardless of whatever it is, make sure to head over to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15, and you'll get 15% off your order from Built, a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. We are joined now by our guy, Eric Kaner, the host of Locked On Vols, @_Kaner on the Twitter machine. Make sure you give him a follow if you're not already. By the way, we are both Braves fans, and Ronnie Acuna is back, and he's killing it.
He's good.
Out of the way, dude. This dude is back. That lineup is raking. Matt Olson is in. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the best baseball team on the planet.
But we could.
Maybe we should take over Locked On Braves. I don't know. Eric, the big news out of Knoxville this week, we learned on Tuesday, is that Santiago Vescovi is coming back. What kind of coup is this for Rick Barnes for next season?
It's big. I mean, it's huge. And I understand like Tennessee's issues a lot of the times with Rick Barnes, and especially the issues the past two seasons have been, an offensive power outage. They'll just go or they'll go stretches in games where, man, just nothing can fall, and these teams go on runs, and you let them back in the game, or they overtake you and they win the ball game, and it's really, really frustrating. Having said all that, Santiago Vescovi is your best shooter, all right? Sure. He is a guy that's got a career, I want to say, like 39% shooting, 3-point shooting percentage, which is, pretty solid. And when you think about it, this kind of makes sense for him, because I think, in his future, he might get a tryout and, go through the process and everything next year, depending on how the season is. But he's a guy that's not from the United States, and he missed half his freshman year because he came in as a mid-year. They wanted to redshirt him, but they just couldn't afford to redshirt him. They needed a point guard because, if you remember, Lamonte Turner kind of stepped away due to injuries during the Christmas holiday back in 2019 or 18, whatever year it was. And so they thrusted Santiago Vescovi into the order. Right. He scores 17 points, makes, 4 3-pointers or whatever in his first start. But he missed half his season. And then the 2020 season, of course, you missed postseason. And so really, like, he just kind of threw together, 3-4 years. And so this gives them a final, last season to see what you can make of. And it's huge for Tennessee because, again, he is a really, really good shooter. He's a dependable shooter. He's an all SEC guard for 2 straight years. He can handle the ball, and that'll be huge as Tennessee, continues to try to look and, get somebody other than Sakai Ziegler to, bring the ball down and obviously help out when he's gone. So massive, massive news. And it had been trending that way for the last couple of weeks because the longer he was holding out, the more it seemed like he was coming back to Tennessee, and then went ahead and made it official on Monday.
That's great news. And to your point, a career 38.1% three-point shooter on 6.5 attempts per game. That's high volume, high percentage. You'll take that. Never shot below 36% for a season from 3. I mean, goodness gracious. Now, one of the other questions is how do you replace Olivier Nkamhoua, who entered the transfer portal? Well, we got some transfer portal news in this week for the Vols. Chris Ledlum coming over. Seems like he will be a big-time help replacing Nkamhoua, not to mention the addition also of Jordan Gainey. With these two guys, Kaner, coming in, what do you think Rick Barnes is getting in the transfer portal from them?
Yeah, real quick on Olivier Nkamhoua first. Really enjoyed him in Knoxville, right. And I think everybody liked him an awful lot. I don't see him playing college basketball next year. I think he entered the portal as this is just me and for people I've spoken to around the program, and we'll see what happens. But I think he just entered the portal just to see if he had another option. Maybe NIL would get you to go somewhere else or something. But I think he's going to go overseas and start a professional career. That is just me, but we'll see what happens with him. Good luck to him, though, of course. Yeah, the two guys Tennessee got in, for the transfer portal, we'll go in reverse order. Chris Ledlum from Harvard. It's a guy that works in a number of different areas for Tennessee because I think that he can add some consistent scoring in the front court. And as good as Olivier Nkamhoua was and how he blew up against Duke and against Texas and sometimes the biggest games, but he was a no-show, both offensively and on the boards, a lot of the portion of the season. He just didn't have that consistency for you. So I think Chris Ledlum will give you that. Now, will he average 18 points a game? I don't know about that in Southeastern Conference play, but can you get 12 points and 9 rebounds, 12 points, 8 rebounds? You'll take that every day of the week. And at 6'6", he has the ability to play the strong 4 when Tennessee wants to go small ball as well. So I think that works in their favor. An intelligent kid, a guy that's experienced. He's been there, done that. And I think this is a really good get. One of those guys that Tennessee really channeled in on early when the portal opened and able to go visit him, get him on campus. They went back to close the deal. And ultimately, he commits to Tennessee a couple of days ago, which was huge. Now,
so you're telling me, hang on, you're telling me that a kid from Harvard is smart and has basketball IQ? I don't believe it.
It's funny. Grant Williams was going to go to Harvard.
Was he really?
Came to Tennessee. Yeah, came to Tennessee. Wow. Of course, Tennessee's getting Chris Ledlum. There's like another connection that I'm just missing right now, but there's kind of a. I don't know how fondly Harvard fans think of Tennessee fans. I would say that there's some dispute there.
Little feeder program. So I cut you off. I think you're about to start talking in on Gainey a little bit.
Yeah, Jordan Gainey. I'm interested to see about him. So Tennessee went out and got a shooter in Tyreek Key last year. We're hoping that he would. He started a lot of games, but hoping that he would be a really nice role player, a shooter. Maybe some added points off the bench, and he played a big role for Tennessee, but didn't quite get what they were thinking in Tyreek Key, I believe. Let's see what happens with Jordan Gainey. Now, the obvious connection there is his father's associate head coach, Justin Gainey, on staff, and so, when he entered the portal, it was really just a matter of, all right, when's he going to announce? He's going to come to Tennessee, right? But a guy that, really went off as a freshman and made 49% of his three-pointers as a true freshman. As a sophomore, I think he shot like 37% from 3. A guy that shoots high volume, again, high average as well. And a couple years in the system, he's been an all-conference player at USC Upstate for 2 seasons. So obviously a step up in level competition. And so that's why I think you should really kind of just wait, see, let him evolve, let him grow, and kind of see what this role is next year. But I do think that he could have like a Tyreek Key-like role next year for Tennessee and hopefully make some more shots. So 2 good additions, I feel like. And, of course, the big one was Santiago Vescovi. Tennessee's basketball roster looks so much better now than what it did this time last week.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure does. And so, Kaner, I think I know what the answer to this is, but of these 3 bits of news, the 2 traditions and the news of Vescovi coming back, what is the biggest impact you think on specifically next year's team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you couldn't say Santiago Vescovi because
I agree. Yeah.
we've single-handedly seen him take over games before him. We've seen him be an all-conference shooting guard the last 2 seasons. He's just the guy that can really he can change the game, and I'm sure Chris Ledlam will have his nights as well. But you know what you're going to get from Santi, not in and not out. Some nights he's not going to be on his game, right? But he's still going to shoot it 15 times, and he'll make it 3 or 4 times to get into double figures somehow, right? And so you depend on that scoring. So, and again, it sounds kind of funny because like I understand Tennessee struggled offensively a lot last year, went through these scoring spurts, and it's like you're bringing back your best guy in that regard. But again, that's kind of how bleak it was looking for next year offensively at this point in time. Now, Tennessee's got, Freddie DeLoyne that's going to come in there and really, impact that offense in the backcourt in a big way. So, but I would say Santiago Vescovi for sure would be the biggest. And, we'll see about Chris Ledlam. I'm excited to see what he can bring because there's so many times last year where you're just sitting there thinking, man, if Tennessee can just get some consistent offense from the front court, this team can maybe go because you got the toughness. They had a 4-man rotation. You got the toughness. You got the rebounds. At one point in time, one of those guys would go off. I mentioned Olivier, and of course, Uros went off against Kentucky in one of those games and
right.
Against LSU.
Yeah.
But it was never like one guy doing it all. And so I would say Vescovi, but man, Chris Ledlam might give him a run for his money.
Okay. And obviously, you'd give up a couple spots. It's like, hey, if our defense was just slightly worse, but we grew exponentially offensively, I think that would be a net positive for the Vols. And let's not forget, we've got some big-time freshmen coming in, JP Estrella from Brewster Academy in New Hampshire, and then 2 guys from Link Academy in Branson, Missouri, an hour and a half south of where I live, Cam Carr and Cade Phillips. So several guys coming into this program could be impactful to what the Vols are trying to do next year, trying to find that offensive efficiency and consistency. And hopefully, as you said earlier, we can get Zakai Ziegler back in and going. But ultimately, as he finds his way back, the hope is like, can we establish some other guys so that he just slides right back in and there's more depth in the rotation? Eric Kaner, we'll keep our eyes on it all this offseason and see what's coming. Thanks for your great work, folks. Once again, please make sure you go check out Locked On Vols and our man Kaner on Twitter. Great stuff from Eric Kane, and excited to see what Tennessee does next year to follow up on the most previous season with that dynamic defense. Can the offense get going? We'll find out. Well, we're going to head down next, though, to Louisiana, where, yikes, it was a little bit of a rough first year for Coach Matt McMahon, but boy, they're bringing in some homegrown talent to get this thing turned around. We'll talk about that in just a second. We continue our SEC day here on Locked On College Basketball. Just all sorts of stuff going on in the Southeastern Conference. And we are joined now by Caroline Fenton, the host of Locked On LSU. Caroline, it's so great to have you on here, folks. You can give her a follow at Caroline Fenton 1, not spelled out, just the numeral. And so, Caroline, here's the thing. LSU finishes this first year under Coach McMahon, and let's just put it kindly, it wasn't the best year the Tigers have ever had. 14-19 overall, 2-16 in SEC play. At this point, 6 transfers out. And so you start wondering like, hey, but I tell you what, sister, it has been a good week in LSU. We get Will Baker on Monday coming in from Nevada and Carlos Stewart coming out of Santa Clara on Tuesday. And so I know that's just half of the incoming transfer portal class, but what is the before we get into these guys specifically, what is the feeling right now around LSU and the fan base with like, oh man, we've had a rough year, all these guys going out, but we're seeing some good influx in the portal?
I always will say the transfer portal giveth, the transfer portal taketh away. And I think that we are seeing that on full display with LSU basketball. It kind of reminds me of what happened this past season. Of course, Will Wade and the NCAA sanctions, LSU parts ways with Will Wade. The entire team leaves. Matt McMahon basically has to rebuild this entire, not basically, he did have to rebuild this entire roster. So now we're kind of seeing that come to fruition again this season. And overall temperature, overall vibe of the program right now is a lot more optimistic than maybe it was just a few weeks ago. And it was during the season. We all kind of expected this to be a rocky year. And if an LSU fan didn't expect it to be a rocky year, then the expectations weren't very fair. But I think that it was really easy to kind of lose sight of those preseason expectations whenever it did look so bad in so many games. But I will give Matt McMahon so much credit, as rough as it was to watch a lot of these games, most of these games throughout the season. I did notice that this team never gave up on him. That it would have been really easy after the first half of SEC play when you barely you won one game, when you're holding on by a thread at the end of the season. It would have been really easy for a lot of these guys to say, you know what, like, screw this. I'm leaving LSU anyways. I'm not going to risk getting hurt. I'm not going to risk making more NIL money. I'm out. I'm checking out. You saw this team fight all the way to the very end. So when there was a lot of bad beef, I guess, between the fan base and Matt McMahon, like, we brought you in to save this program. You were able to build up Murray State. Why can't you do it now? LSU fans are very impatient. I don't think that that's very specific just to LSU, but it's definitely been highlighted over this past season. So I think a lot of fans were growing impatient with Matt McMahon, but I looked at it like, it's not going to be good anyways, but we can at least pick up a few little cookie crumbs along the way. And that was one thing that I picked up on, is that this team really didn't quit on Matt McMahon. So enter these new transfers. I think overall, a lot of people are very excited about a lot of these guys that are coming in. Some may not be household names, but a lot of them are, especially in Baton Rouge. So I think that whenever this fan base was kind of down and out on this team and was looking at Matt McMahon like, hey, dude, when are you going to start turning things around? Maybe they're starting to see that turnaround come to fruition, at least in terms of building the roster.
That's great, because not losing a locker room is half the battle as you're flipping things around. And so I think that speaks so much to not only who he is as a tactical coach, but who he is as a locker room coach, if I can put it that way. And so, I mean, you start to look at it, you lose Cam Hayes to the transfer portal, Adam Miller, both of whom are two of the top three scorers, not to mention KJ Williams, the leading scorer who came over with coach from Murray State, is frankly just out of eligibility at this point. And so you have to have this influx. And so, Caroline, we look at it. We've got Jordan Wright coming in from Vanderbilt, from Louisiana, Baton Rouge specifically. We've got Jalen Cook coming back to LSU, who was at Tulane after starting at LSU. And then we talked about Will Baker, who's coming from Nevada, who's originally from Texas. And then Carlos Stewart, that most recent addition, coming from Santa Clara, but also a Baton Rouge guy. So, Caroline, what I want to ask you is, with 3 of these 4 transfers coming in being Louisiana kids, how important is that in helping to rebuild a foundation for the Tigers program under Coach McMahon?
I think that it's a priority of every flagship program to keep your in-state talent home, but it absolutely is a priority for Louisiana across all sports. It's been Brian Kelly's number one priority when recruiting in football, is we are keeping our top prospects home. And I think you're starting to see Matt McMahon take that kind of vision and bring that to life with LSU basketball, is keeping that talent home and also bringing that talent back home. You look at Carlos Stewart and Jordan Wright from Santa Clara and Vanderbilt, respectively. Like you mentioned, they're both from Baton Rouge. They actually went to high school together. So, it makes it a little bit more, you're coming home and you're also coming back to guys that you grew up with. That's a big priority, I think, for Matt McMahon, because while Louisiana isn't known as a rich basketball talent state, when you think of Louisiana and you think of talent in high school, you think football. But when you look around college basketball and you look at these guys that may not be the most household name kind of guys, but you look and see what they've been able to produce, and they went elsewhere from Louisiana, bringing that talent back home whenever there's an underlying, love and desire to be in the state of Louisiana when you're from there. I think that's step one in rebuilding a program. You're not going to go out and grab the top prospects in high school and grab all the top transfer portal prospects in the country, because frankly, most of these top prospects are leaving to go win a championship. You're not going to do that at LSU right now. But what we are going to do is continue to collect talent to build a roster. So you're not winning 2 SEC games a year. Maybe you're winning, you're starting to make a little bit further run in the tournament. Maybe you're starting to get more bids to the NCAA tournament, and then it becomes a more attractive place for out-of-state athletes to come. So I think that's really the start. Build the foundation, Louisiana, and then grow your roots even further out from there.
Well, and from an offensive standpoint, I mean,
Yeah.
you lose those top 3 scorers. All 4 of these guys are double-digit scorers last year, wherever they're coming from. And I know some may look at Carlos Stewart at Santa Clara and say, well, that's the WCC. What is he doing? Well, he did the same
Competitive
thing.
conference.
Exactly. He did it against Gonzaga. He did it against St. Mary's. So, folks, it's going to translate. Just bet on that. So, Caroline, as you look at these 4 transfers coming in, not to mention there's Corey Chest and Mikey Williams, the incoming freshman. Who of these 4 transfers really stands out to you in terms of perhaps being the most impactful newcomer?
It's tough, but I would say probably Jalen Cook.
Okay.
Because he is bringing all of that offensive firepower, like you mentioned, that they're losing. And Jalen Cook can come in and kind of be your true point guard. And the same thing about Carlos Stewart could also be applied to Jalen Cook of in the AAC. You're not going to see as tough of defenses or as quality of opponents that you're going to see in the SEC. But when you're averaging almost 20 points a game, I don't care what conference you're in. That's impressive. And you're going to be able to bring a lot of that offense to a team that's lacking offense a ton. And I also look at Jordan Wright, if I can add another one in there. While Jordan Wright is averaging, or this past season was averaging the lowest number of points of all of these 4 transfers, I think Jordan Wright brings a defensive presence and a size that this team was lacking this past year. So I would say offensively, Jalen Cook, the transfer from Tulane, who is returning to Baton Rouge after he transferred from LSU in his freshman season, and Jordan Wright for his defensive presence.
Love that. We're going to have to wait and see. Forgive me. I'm a dad. I make terrible, corny jokes, but can Jalen cook next year? We're going to wait to see. And obviously these men, they got to keep up with the ladies who have just brought home a national championship under Kim Mulkey. Coach McMahon, you know, he and the dudes want to hold up that standard that the Lady Tigers are living up to. Caroline, big congrats to the LSU Tigers on that national championship.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As we are known, we are a women's basketball school that also has a basketball and a football team on the side. But thank you very much. It's been a super fun couple of weeks as an LSU Tiger fan and looking forward to even more Kim Mulkey success in the future.
Absolutely. Well, folks, as we said off the top, please go make sure you check out Caroline Fenton and the Locked On LSU podcast. Great stuff coming at you all the time over there. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us, getting us up to speed on all these transfers coming in for Coach Matt McMahon.
It's a whole lot of them, but I appreciate you, Isaac. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Locked On College Basketball. That's it for this week of Locked On College Basketball. Once again, my thanks to Eric Kane of Locked On Vols and Caroline Fenton of Locked On LSU for joining us today. Please make sure you go give them a follow wherever you get podcasts and, of course, on Twitter as well. If you would, go give us a review, 5 stars, positive reviews. We're trying to grow the reach of the program. That's one way to do it. Please make sure to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, leave your comments. Would love to know your thoughts on what Kentucky should do and all these players coming into Tennessee and LSU. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and until Monday, peace.